Hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Edmonds. This is Teaching Liberty, and today I'm here with
Danelle Rhodes.
Danelle Rhodes, and we are both in Connecticut. And so, what we wanted to start doing was bringing you a weekly update on what's going on here in Connecticut with the trending news items, maybe some cultural items. Like, we don't want to just be like boring people always reading the news, but we're certainly going to dig in. We're going to actually read some bills, but we're going to have some fun here as well. So thank you and welcome to everybody who's joining us. This is kind of a new thing we have going on. We're doing some experimentation here, and we want you to hit that like button though. So hopefully you'll like it. Share this out. Go ahead, hit that share button, share it out with a few of your friends. Tell them they got two beautiful faces here. And I thought before we got into our news stories today, which we're going to be covering some hot items, right? Book banning or pornography. We're going to be connecting that to some legislation that is going through the Connecticut State Legislature at this time. And we're going to be bringing you a couple of special guests to fill us in on some of the things that they are working on. But first, I thought that, we should probably tell the people a little bit about who we are.
So I'll go first. I'm
Yeah,
Danelle Rhodes.
yeah.
You know me. So I have been the chapter leader for FAIR, which is the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, for 2 years now. And but before that, I worked with FIRE over the summer to try to get free speech into our high schools to try to reach people further about what our rights are. And basically, I'm just become an advocate for our Constitution. I think that covers it. I used to say, for education and for this and for that. But after graduating the Charter Oaks Leadership Program, I would say I'm more of an advocate for our founding documents, particularly our Constitution. So
Right. There's
that's
no
where I'm coming
parental rights. There's no whatever type of rights. There are individual rights. And some
from.
individuals, they happen to be parents. So I think that is a similar viewpoint from where I'm coming to things. We're both homeschool moms, although you have your children, you have multiple children, and they are older than my son, who's only 7 years old, and they were in the public schools for some period of time. So you're bringing some of that with you. And you're also further upstate. I'm basically like the New York City part of the state, and you're like
Yes.
really in Connecticut.
Yes, I'm the last town until you hit Massachusetts. So, and I'm coming to you from a town of approximately, on a good day, 12,000 people. So it's very tiny little town and beautiful and, rural Connecticut. So
Right. So I love that we can bring both of those
yeah.
perspectives. We got the city perspective, the rural perspective, we got the millennial perspective, we got the Gen X perspective. And uh and we're going to bring you a bunch of guests who hopefully have perspectives and live everywhere in between in the beautiful, it is a beautiful state. We have a beautiful state. I was just driving, had to go to West Hartford for something yesterday. And, things here in Fairfield County, not that it's not beautiful, but it's just everything's so close together and there's a lot of buildings and this and that. But as soon as you get out of Fairfield County, you're just like, whoa.
Yeah,
So
it's
shout out
very,
to the
it's
shout
very,
out to the state of Connecticut. But let's go ahead and get on with our first uh news item of the day. What's going on, Queen Bee's Pharmacy? Make sure you check out her in the description down below. Use code TeachingLiberty to save 15% off over at queenbeespharmacy.com. And let's see. Sorry, I'm like, we're doing it all here. Producing it, we're putting it together. So let's go ahead and share up this first article. So this story is actually a little over 2 months old now, but I think it's super relevant because right now in the state of Connecticut, there is a legislation that is going through that is changing the definition of gender identity and some of the related things to that. But before we actually dive into the bill, I wanted to give us some context for why it's important and why some of the maybe perhaps innocuous sounding language, like, oh, that's not a big deal, is actually a big deal. And so this happened back in March in Guilford, Connecticut, there's a controversy over books in the library. And so this isn't just something that you see on Fox News or in some right-wing conspiracy. Right? This is happening in the very, very blue state of Connecticut, and these things are actually happening. So parents went to the school board meeting and they read aloud from books that they say were pornographic material, inappropriate. They were sexual, they were vulgar, and they are actually available in libraries in Guilford public schools. And so some of the books, they don't actually quote some of the books, so we're going to hop over to another article, but some of the titles are things like Flamer, Lawn Boy, It's Perfectly Normal, right? So It's Perfectly Normal doesn't really stand out, but Flamer, Lawn Boy certainly have some connotations. And they said
Well,
it's not.
I would add,
Go ahead.
Stephanie, that, it's not just Guilford. Guilford certainly has this article published, but, I mean, just today, I, spoke with people from Fairfield County that are, having this exact issue. They're not quite sure how to manage it, and I'm gonna hopefully give them some guidance on how to, I think we have to reach both sides. We have to understand why people want these in the schools, and as a libertarian minded person, like, I want people to have access to books, and I think most parents do. So I just it's I mean, even out here in my town of 12,000 people, we had this exact issue come up in last October.
Mm,
And I could get pretty
yeah.
much every district has had this issue come forward at different levels.
Right,
So
yeah, I know in Stanford, it was winter 2021 because we were also having the mask issue at the same time, I remember, and they were putting out this book, and every teacher in the district was given a PD. I don't think it wasn't like a full day, but it was like a part of a professional development day. They had a specific professional development on this book that's called The Pants Project. And at the very beginning of the book, they introduced the topic of transgenderism. And I mean, honestly, I read the book, and except for that part where they define transgenderism, and then there's this one like really weird part about them being in the locker room and a bulge in the pants. Like, I could see myself being the little girl in the book being like, because I did this in high school. Girls were supposed to wear skirts to our formal events, and I wore pants, and I would take the points or whatever the consequence was because I just preferred pants. So I could totally see myself like this little girl live like, yeah, girls should be able to wear pants, like, or have the choice. But it's just the insertion of this whole transgender thing, and it's meant for kids 3rd to 8th grade.
yeah,
So there are so many elements here, and it's certainly not as simple as being like, these parents are trying to ban books and these parents are standing, up for an inclusive school. And definitely there, if you look at the quotes, we'll get into some of the actual books in a second, but if you look at the quotes from the Guilford parents, I really think that they are measured responses that are really trying to dig into this. They're saying, um, it's not about book banning. The thing is, these books, it's not your place to give them to my kids, and it's not my place to give them to anyone else's kids. If you want to have them available to children, that's fine. If parents want to take them out and show them and go over them with their kids, that's fine too. But parents should be made aware. There's got to be a way we can communicate and make things accessible, but have the parents aware that these books are being given out. And then another parent said something similar, saying like, it's fine to have them to purchase and review, but like it should be something that the parents do with their children. And there's a few other comments basically along those same lines. Though I do want to read this one comment here that's a little bit longer. It says, it's particularly disheartening for me to hear there are members of our community jumping on what feels like a national right wing movement to remove books from classrooms, right?
mm,
So, this is that there's, of course, people that are going to come in and try to take what I think were pretty reasonable comments and be like, this is a right wing national thing, and they're somehow importing it into our little town that has nothing to do what we're doing here. Um, she said, uh, it's not about specific books or to read freely. It's about intellectual freedom. It's about teachers and librarians being able to connect to their students to books that can help be seen and given to them and give them a window to somebody else's experience. And that's so crazy because I think that this is so much like the language that we would use, right? It's the right of free people to read freely.
Okay, but you know what? This is exactly how it connects to this bill. They said free people. These are minors. These are children we're talking about, and they're blurring that line. And that I think is what parents really have a problem with. Like I don't care if you write a book about everything I'm against. I mean, there are plenty of books out there that I don't believe or would care to read, or maybe I've read and been like, wow, I wish I could have read that because now I have that visual, right? I mean, it's the same thing with movies. I mean, when a kid comes to my house and they want to watch an R-rated movie, well, when they were younger, now it's like a free for all here, but um, I would I would actually text or call the parent and say, "Hey, you know, so and so says that she's seen this. I don't want to make that decision for you. Like, are you comfortable?" And sometimes the parent will be like, "Oh yeah, we've seen it a dozen times." And other parents would be like, "Absolutely not. They're lying. I'm coming to pick them up right now." And they would go so
Yeah, same
quickly
thing.
very south.
Yeah,
So,
same thing.
but
And even with my
it's
son,
not
there's
my
certain things.
place.
Right.
It's not my place.
There's certain things that I'll watch with my son and whatever, but I wouldn't let him watch on his own, or I certainly
Right.
wouldn't have on if there was, friends that we had over.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I wanted to pull up this New York Post article because it does actually show some of the books, unlike I didn't like that CT Investigator article didn't really show. But here's some actual quotes from the book. So it says there's this passage that mentions the protagonist Elias in a room with a male friend or male friends who are masturbating. We're each busting a load in this bottle. If you don't come, you have to drink it, she read aloud. I learned about masturbation 2 years ago, kind of by accident. No one ever told me what it was. So you can see that they're kind of trying to be like, "Oh, this is a learning experience. We're just teaching kids what is like a natural part of their experience," right?
In no
Uh,
room in the world are boys sitting around masturbating. They might be masturbating, but it's not a group activity, generally speaking.
right.
It's
Usually
just
it's like a
weird. This
personal
is some
activity, right?
right. This is some weird like fantasy somebody is now put into our kids' heads.
And so it says the book continued diving into a segment in which the protagonist remembers the time he discovered pornographic film his father had hidden in the house. This book also makes explicit references to genitalia containing images of naked teenage boys. Board members cut the mother's reading short to call the next speaker up, but the audience members applauded her for taking a stand. And that's also something that we see over and over again is when parents go to these board meetings and read up, they're like, "Excuse me, you can't read that here. Like you're out of order." Oh, like
The
oh,
hypocrisy is like, what? Kids
yeah,
can have this, but I can't read this to adults. It makes no well, that's okay.
exactly.
I mean, we can assume there is going to be hypocrisy on this particular issue. And I think they just don't know what to say. They don't want to say
Right.
we're against the book. So they're
Exactly.
like,
And I
stop.
think it's so interesting too, just relating back to how the lines can blur with the language that you use and how these really are nuanced topics is, for example, when it comes to actually medically transitioning somebody. And what you do when you medically transition somebody is you take away their, like, if they have the bottom, what they call bottom surgery, which is really a euphemism for cutting off your genitalia, be clear. Um, you can no longer have an orgasm, right? So that is something that I would be like, why are we taking away this experience from a person, right? Obviously, it's not something we want to encourage the experience of with young people who aren't ready for it, who might not understand. But when you're an adult and you are ready to have that experience or whatever age that is, right? They should have it. So again, the lines are blurry because I'll say that's something that I do want to protect and I do want to make sure that people are able to have that experience. But I'm also like
Yeah.
not going around being like, hey, here's a book about how to have an orgasm
Right.
to underage people.
Well, it's important to preserve the integrity of healthy human bodies in general, right? I mean, that's what medical practice has always been. And suddenly it is no longer. I mean, even when you're talking about plastic surgery, people are doing that to enhance what they have, generally speaking, or maybe repair a scar or something like that. but we've never actually taken a functional body and made it dysfunctional. So it's a crime. I mean, it's just a crime. These people, some people, maybe they'll be happy with it, but I just, obviously children are not in a position, they don't even know what an orgasm is. Like, how can they say I don't want one? Or they don't understand. Like, I didn't want kids until I was way, way later. And if I had not, I don't know, if I was, in this day and age, who knows? Maybe I would have been like, yeah, well, then I'll have to worry about this or that. I just think it sets up such a crazy dynamic. It's just abusive. I mean, frankly, kids are not capable of making these decisions. And there's lots of analogies to the things that they are and are not allowed to do. I guess we can restate those things, like you can't get a tattoo.
Can't see
You
a
can't
rated R
drink. You can't
movie.
even smoke.
Can't
Yes,
vote, right?
exactly. And yet, right. And yet we're
I
saying, oh yeah, you can have these books. Like, I don't
Right.
remember Penthouse being in my high school. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Like, it seems a little odd.
I remember being discouraged from engaging in these types of conversations or seeking out that type of material, right? Because that's what your parents are supposed to do. They're supposed to provide very clear lines as to, like, this is right and this is wrong, or these are things that are acceptable for young children or people under 18 to do, and these are things that once you become an adult, you'll hopefully be able to make the proper decisions. And
And
those
then as
lines
a
need.
teacher, because you were a teacher, it also sets up the dynamic of us versus them. So now teachers are viewed as the enemy. My teachers were always great. They're still great. I mean, we've had a few incidents, but it was handled professionally. Even though we completely disagree on what they were trying to teach, it still was handled professionally. Um, so, I feel like, what a terrible thing to vilify all teachers. But this is
And
exactly
setting up
what
those dynamics. Well, why
and
don't we
let's
go
get Leslie up
over.
here.
Yeah, if Leslie's in here, I don't see her in
I don't see her
the.
yet.
Yeah, but, text or tell her that she can come in. I'll pull up House Bills 6638, and we can
Okay.
start talking about that and reading through it, because, again, this isn't just some right-wing conspiracy theory or something that's happening nationally that people are cutting and pasting into Connecticut. These are things that are actually happening in Connecticut, and at the same time, we can see how the legislation is slowly moving little by little to make all these definitions more ambiguous and open the doorway potentially for these other things. So, Leslie, what's going on? Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So, I'm about to pull up the ConnecticutFamilies.org take action article that goes over House Bill 6638. But real quick, why don't you just introduce yourself? And oh, she might have froze though. So, okay, there she is. Boom.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Why don't you just go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing and your understanding of what's going on with this House bill.
So sure. I'm sorry. I'm not new to this technology, so my camera doesn't want to. All right. All right, there we are.
You're good. You're framed nicely. We can see you.
So thank you. I am Leslie Wolfgang. I'm the Public Policy Director for the Family Institute of Connecticut. And we've been around since 1989, though I've only been working there and getting paid for about a year, but I've been a volunteer there for many years, for as long as my husband's been the executive director, and that's about 15 years. So what we do is we educate and advocate on behalf of family issues up at the state capitol. We travel around the state of Connecticut telling people about public policy initiatives, things that are going on, things that are also happening nationally. So what we do every year is we review the legislation that's proposed, and we submit testimony and share it with.
Sorry, I was trying to spotlight you.
That's okay. Share it with our members, people who are on our email list. And we encourage them to participate, to come up with the Capitol, to write their legislators, find out who their legislators are, just become involved in the process. So we're involved in a variety of socially conservative issues, issues like abortion, assisted suicide, family issues. So we get involved in a lot of things. And so there's so many bills up at the state capitol. And this one that came to our attention most recently was HB 6638. And that has to do with redefining sexual orientation when it comes to the anti-discrimination laws here in Connecticut. So it didn't get on our radar until it already passed out of the House. That happens. But since then, when we saw that, we saw on Twitter, I think that it had passed, and it, we were like, oh, we got to take a look at this. And it took some analysis on our part, but we determined that this definition is being changed in a way to be greatly expanded.
Is it this one right here where it says discriminatory practice of this is in violation if any person?
So that's the current law.
Okay, this is the current law.
Okay, so well,
Page 10, I think.
What they're adding there, you see the underlined word age. Sexual orientation was already included in there. So you actually have to go to a different section of the bill to see the they're actually inserting a new definition, and it's over in section
right here.
Sometimes it's easier to go by lines.
Right here, is it?
So lines 143. Yep. Yes. Okay. So that's going to be the new definition of sexual orientation. The old one, which we have on our blog post, it's very little to find any overlap. It's really being entirely rewritten. And the current law is tied to, I think it's 3 different gender identities. And this one really ties identity to whatever you're sexually attracted to.
So it says emotionally or sexually attracted to.
Romantically, emotionally, or sexually attracted to. So you kind of have to go back and see, well, to which. So it's a person's identity. Okay, identity. We all have identities under modern gender theory. And that identity, that is your sexual orientation, revolves around the gender to which you are attracted to. So you have to break it down. Okay, gender. According to modern gender theory, everybody has a gender. That's what's being taught our children in school. Okay, they're being helped to identify their gender. So everybody has a gender.
I can come and I can say like I'm Zur or Za, and they have to say, okay, that's a protected class.
Well, no. Okay, so this is I think that has more to do with
pronouns.
Your pronoun usage and how you express yourself. That might be closer to gender expression, which is another part of the law that you can't, we're prohibited from discriminating against. And that's a different topic discussion. But this has to do with your sexual orientation. And if you know your gender unicorn, I don't know if you had your genderbread person lesson, your sexual orientation and your identity and your gender and your sex assigned at birth, these are all different things, okay? And so for these purposes, for sexual orientation, it has to do with whom you are sexually attracted to, okay? So you have your identity, and your identity, it's all like, it's very complicated. It's almost like, I don't want to be derogatory, but it's like dealing with an artificial world, and you just have to play by, I'm using their terms and their rules, the people who have this agenda, okay? Like and I'm trying to be respectful and just use the terms that they give me. So it can be confusing for people, but for me, like, I don't see people as I'm going to take a sidetrack here.
Yeah.
I don't see people as their gender or their identity or by their sexual orientation. I see everybody as a child of God. Okay, that's me. That's how I relate to people. So if you don't do that, if you don't just respect people as human beings for who they are and treat everybody with respect, and you try and create all these different categories, it causes confusion and hurt feelings and who's in, who's out.
Right. So it actually seems to create more exclusiveness rather than inclusiveness, right?
That's right.
Sure,
Yeah.
if I'm talking to somebody and this could be part of who they are, but it's not something that I'm going to have as their singular thing that anytime I talk to them, I'm like looking through that lens. It's much more effective to just see everybody as a human,
Right.
and perhaps, you
Right.
might have some religious connotation to it, a child of God or an individual, whatever your preferred language is. I can it does. It gets so confusing.
Well,
Right.
that's why FAIR is using the terminology, we're the pro-human movement,
Pro
to take that sting out of it, because we're all human. I don't care what color or what gender or what attraction you have, whether, we're all human. So I think, even though that's not a religious connotation, the notion that we're all human and we should be kind and we should be respectful is spreading. So that's good news from a religious perspective, right? Because it doesn't matter if it has that attached to it. It
Right.
in
But
means the
it's like,
same thing.
again, it seems like they're trying to take advantage of that, because I came over here to the ConnecticutFamilies.org website, and what this makes clear is that because this is about sexual attractions, right? Who you are sexually attracted to, it is so inclusive that it's also going to include people that like pedophilia or nepophilia, which I'm not sure what that is. Oh,
Attraction to babies.
to babe. Oh, that's like,
Rough.
Okay,
wow.
but
Okay.
we don't. You can be. Here's the thing, though. Too is people genuinely do have these attractions, and the majority, I'm sure, struggle with them. Right? You can even say, like, the majority of people do not, with these attractions, do not want to be anywhere near a child, and that
Right.
can be true. And we can
Many
pause
don't
it
act
that
on it.
when looking at this bill. But on the other hand, we as parents still need to be able to sift through people who are coming to work with our children to say, I'm sorry, I saw your post on Instagram this weekend that advertised you were at the, Man Boy Love Association meeting. You're just not a good fit for working in my home. You're just not a good fit for working at my daycare. I get it. You have this sexual attraction, but you have to understand that this is not a good job for you. And I would say the vast majority of those people with these attractions don't want that job, right? They're struggling. No, thank you. But we know, we see it in the news, there are people with these attractions, and some of them seek out positions with children. Okay. And parents need to be able to say, without the threat of being dragged in front of the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, I'm sorry, you cannot work with my child. You cannot work at this daycare. You cannot work at this camp.
You
Okay.
can't. I remember there's several huge cases at, I know, like there was the college, the Sandusky one, and then there was the one with all the gymnasts. And these are examples of
Yeah.
people who have embedded themselves in professions where they had not only access to children, but in the case of the gymnast, it was like a doctor who was touching them and telling them that he was performing certain examinations on them, sometimes in front of their parents. So we know that these things happen and that they are covered up for by the system. So the fact that, again, we're widening up this definition is certainly concerning. So what should people do? What can people do right now to take action and hopefully prevent this from passing into law?
Okay. So, as we noted, it's already passed out of the Connecticut House. What we need to do is to contact our senators and the governor and even the leadership of the Senate and ask them to oppose this bill. You can do that directly, but if you know your legislator's email address, or they're pretty readily accessible by doing a search on the internet, or you can visit ctfamily.org. We have an action center and where you click on the action alert and they find your legislators for you and send
Right here.
the email, a pre-written email, which you can edit, and it goes directly to your senator. So
Right.
we're
And
really,
so I'll link this in the description down below. So you can just go down there. Once this stream is over, for anybody who's watching it back, it will be down there, or just go to ctfamilies.org.
Right. We have a couple blog posts, and we almost always link to the action alert in the blog post. And the blog post goes into more detail about how we got to this point in the definition. But you hit the nail on the head when you said it's revolving around attraction. Okay, it's really opening up to your identity is based on any sexual attraction you have. And if anything, gender just limits it to people. Like, you have to be attracted to other people, because at this point it's people who have genders, but there's no restriction to their age. And I would challenge the legislators who say it doesn't contain what we say it does based on the simple reading of the bill, is then add a restriction. It used to be the old law. The current law has a prohibition to sexual orientation where the underlying behavior is part of a sex crime, and that's being taken out. So tell us parents what you're doing to protect the children, definitionally in this statute. That's all. I don't think we're asking for too much.
Yeah, I certainly don't.
Earlier today, Stephanie, all they have to do is add adult live human. 3 words, and this is solved. So I would like to hear from the legislator, why will you not include those 3 words? I want a very specific answer to that. And I think we need to hold them to account, because it would solve the whole problem.
I agree. And, it's simple things, but I mean, I was watching a school board meeting last night, and it is just maddening the way that bureaucracy works. But that's why we have to have amazing people out there like Leslie and all the good people over at the Connecticut Family Center. So please check them out. Go reach out to your legislatures, and let's make sure that this does not become law. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
And we are actually going to bring in another amazing Connecticut person. This is the Connecticut show, Sally, and she is from the Connecticut Liberty Tribune. Are you in here? Uh-oh. Let's see if she can get in. Looks like she might be frozen. Let's see. I'm actually going to kick her out, and then let's see if she can come back and get reconnected and come and give us a little bit of an update of stuff that she's working over at the CTLibertyTribune.com. But I guess while we're waiting to see if she pops back in here, Danelle, what are your thoughts on, wrapping up this issue with the pornography in schools / book banning debate, and then how that is kind of mirroring the things that are happening in the legislature? I know we hear so much about the things on the news, right? But we don't hear so much about the things in the legislature. So just some thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I think I'm new to getting involved with the legislator. I did a little bit of testimonial things last year, and it can be overwhelming, but it's actually very easy to testify. They make it very easy. You can do it live. So I would just encourage everyone to participate, and maybe we can do another live about how to go about doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we've got Sally in here. Like I said, she is from, and I can just pull up your Twitter page real quick, Real Connecticut News. The handle's at CTL Tribune, and she's got her website linked up here. What's going on, Sally? How you doing today? Let's see if we can get this to work. I don't know, we might be having some connection issues. We're getting something. Can you hear us?
Uh-oh.
I don't know. Uh-oh, we can't hear you. Can you hear her?
Is she muted?
I don't know. No, it doesn't say she's muted, but it could just be an issue with like the permissions. It looks like she's coming in on the phone. So it could be that you just don't have the proper permissions, Sally. Like sometimes you have to like go and like allow, you know what I mean? Allow the speaker to connect. All right. Well, we'll just give her another second to see if she can figure that out.
But everybody should go and subscribe.
Yes, here we can pull
CTL
up.
Tribune, I think, is how it is on Twitter.
That's not the right.
In the meantime.
yeah, so we can go over here and just like show her website.
Yep.
So CTL Tribune. It's got a nice layout here, classic. And she basically does like super local reporting, runs op-eds, really good stuff like that. Let's see. She took her video off. Did that help? Can we hear you, Sally, without your video? No, I don't think so. We might have to do like a check or something like when one of these days before our next live and then make sure that we can get her in here.
Okay.
So I wanted to finish up with this last story. Sorry, there you are. About pot. Not my potted garden that I have in the back. I always joke. I'm like, "Oh, I got a pot garden." But it's just like literally a garden made up of pots that has like peppers and tomatoes and just like regular house
You know,
garden.
you're probably giving me street cred for when my kids see this, they're gonna be like, "She's so cool." They're gonna be like, wanna be your best friend.
That's so funny. Listen, pot is not cool. Unless you're
Oh,
doing it legally. I don't know. Is that the right thing to say?
anyway, what would you like to say about this
Yeah,
fabulous
so, I mean, I've been
Connecticut
hearing
history state?
there's a big thing going on in the state of Connecticut because I think it was actually 2 years ago that it got legalized, and then last year, they started rolling out the actual like regulations around it. That always got me. It was legal for a full year before like the rules about how you could actually do it. So it was like actually not legal. It was like a weird gray area. But in Stanford, I live in Stanford, so it's like one of the bigger city centers. So of course, that's where the pot stores are going to be, and it doesn't help that like all the little surrounding places like Darien and New Canaan, they're like, no, we're not letting uh recreational marijuana or even medicinal, I don't know, in our town. So Stanford is then going to get all their business. So everybody's vying for the best pot shop space.
How's that going?
um I mean, again, I've been trying to keep up with it a little bit. That's why I kind of wanted to bring it up and read through. I guess last night we had a vote on our board of reps. There's this one shop that's trying to get in a particular location, and there's a lot of tensions over that. So I was going to read the specific story, but I don't know. Do you like this is rolling out all over Connecticut? So I didn't know if you had any other perspective from how this is going down in other towns, or if you've heard any other issues with, legalization of marijuana and the rollout of all the regulations around that.
I think they're giving out, I mean, you have to pay quite a bit for the permit to have a dispensary. And I believe that even, I mean, certainly out here, it's, our town, I think we do have somebody permitted, but we also haven't seen anything. But our town has always had like, like a smoke shop of some kind.
Mm.
So, I mean, it
And
seems like
smoke shops are different, right? Like they don't actually sell
right.
marijuana.
Correct. But I mean, that sort of paraphernalia, that sort of idea has been in our town for a long time. I would be one of those residents that would rather it not be here. Like, I'd rather have it somewhere else. Just because, I mean, look, crime does revolve around those things. You can look at the data. This reminds me of
Like a
um,
legal marijuana store, there's more crime around those?
well, I'm thinking of when alcohol, this goes way back because what happened was nobody, when alcohol was, brought back into the public domain, um, nobody wanted liquor stores in their neighborhood. So what they did is they put it in the Black community. And I've heard Bob Woodson speak about this, and he felt like that is a targeted act and that was the downfall in many ways of Black
Mhm.
community centers because there was easy access, inexpensive. It was normalized faster because people were making money. People had jobs there. People that, in the community, like, oh, yeah, I got a job at the, blah, blah, blah liquor store. Oh, yeah, great. So it became, I think, that I just am layering on top of what I've heard Bob Woodson speak about in terms of how the decline of those neighborhoods. And I'm assuming that marijuana is going to have a similar effect
Okay,
in
that's a
my
fair
area.
argument. I think it's a good argument. I mean, I see it happen all the time with the school education policy and the way that they either roll out certain programs or, for example, the masking stuff, right? This past winter, there were many, a handful of districts that remasked. Every single one of them was in a poor urban district. Right. And that's the same for all of these policies that lasted the longest and were the harshest when they were putting the migrants in New York City, where they're looking
Yep,
for spaces, always in these poor neighborhoods with,
exactly.
yeah, because they know that the parents, they're working, they're trying to pay the bills, they got a lot going on. Everybody has so much going on, but they know that those communities will offer the least resistance. So I can certainly see how that would be the case. Although I find it really funny that everybody's like freaking out about these marijuana shops, but you literally cannot tell that it's a marijuana shop. We have one that's maybe like a mile down the road, and I didn't know what it was for the longest
Well, you
because
will.
it's
I mean,
super
I've
discreet.
seen this. Boston has had it, Massachusetts had it legal
Yeah.
for a while now, right? So my brother lives in Boston. I've been there many times. I literally have seen a line more than a city block long to get
Wow.
into the dispensary.
Okay, I've
No,
never seen one like
really?
that out here. There would be people a while like, there'd be, like, maybe a few guys that were standing out, but again, there's no signage, like, on these places, or it's, like,
Not
super discreet, you
not
know?
yet.
But what's so
Not
funny is when you go by these smoke shops, it's, like, bongs in the window, and it's, like, this huge
yeah,
long thing that's, like, "Smoke here," or
right,
whatever, and my
right.
son there's one up the street that just came in, and it's, like, Christmas colors. It's, like, red and green, and they had a Santa Claus, one of those, like, floppy things out front, and my son's like, "Is it Christmas?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And, like, they
Not
have
yet.
their tree lightings kinda confused over there, I think. I was like, it was cheaper to get that one, it's
They're
off
gonna lay
season.
off their merchandise.
Yeah, so I just think it's so interesting that these shops, like, they're like, "Smoke here, da, da, da," like, all out in the open, and, like, that's totally cool, but, like, these, like, kind of discreet.
Well, I don't think that's totally cool, frankly. Like, I'm not thrilled that we have 2, not 1, but 2 in our 12, mind you, 12,000 people,
Listen, they
okay?
provide
We
an
don't need 2.
important service.
It's like,
Think about I mean, come on. 12,000 people and you need 2 smoke shops. That is an important service to the people in your town.
indeed, I would never, as a live and let live type of mantra, welcome one and all. Ideally, I would rather have some other services provided. I could think of a laundry list of things I'd leave town
Right.
for that I would
I
love to have
mean,
here,
I think that
but
they can do I don't really understand the need to be like, "Smoke shop here." Like, it's not like people aren't going to go to your store, right? Because
well, I mean,
there's plenty of people who made plenty of money before pot was legal or before
no,
any of these things were
it's just like
legal.
any other business,
That's what I'm
frankly.
s
You know
like,
what I mean? I think like the smoke shops are doing what they should. They're good at their marketing. They want you don't have to even look at the sign. Oh, that's a smoke shop.
I
Now,
guess.
I don't fault them for that. I mean,
Yeah,
their product is something that people want and willing to pay for it. Like,
yeah. I mean, liquor
great,
stores are the same way. They're, like, plastered with, like, the whatever the special is and this and that,
right?
and, we don't think twice about that, really.
Yeah, and I
And
think that's all fine, and I think, like, look, the bill has passed, and, I can see why communities would want to mute that a little bit for the dispensaries, but that's a temporary thing, that's an adjustment period,
I
because what's
got
gonna
you.
happen is it will be normalized, and it will do what all the other stores do, which is advertise. I mean, it's a little bit different because I think you still have to have a prescription, right?
No.
Don't you have to have
No, 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 it's recreational. So,
okay,
not every spot is. I think that it's like you have to get a special license to
I
be
see.
recreational. But for example, I know, like, the one, near me, it was well, there was one as soon as it went recreational, there was a brand new one that opened up that's all recreational, but then there was, like, a delay for the one that was down the street, and then And then they like made an announcement like 2 weeks later that they were. So I think it's like you have to apply for the recreation thing. And then I think that it's differentiated even within the buildings. Like it's a different space if you go to medical and if you go to recreational, which I think is the same in Massachusetts. I think I went one up there and it's like a separate uh like line.
Well, anyway, what happened last night that made you
All right,
want to
so I'll
talk
pull up
about
the
this
article.
today?
Yeah, I'll pull up the article. And it's really funny because they actually just have like a weed right across the top of the article.
Nice.
Like
Nice
this is like
visual.
Connecticut
What you were just talking
Examiner.
about.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny because I was like, oh no, we're like so worried about kids seeing weed. Like, but you pull up this and it's just like right across the top. Proposed recreational pot store struggles to find sweet spot. I guess that's what it's going to be called, with Stanford residents. And so residents concerned about children and increased traffic near a proposed recreational marijuana dispensary were overshadowed by general protests against state marijuana legalization on Monday. So I guess there's like, and this is what I'm kind of against is like, okay, like we can talk about what are the like regulations for implementing like recreational marijuana, but when I start see people like generally protesting against marijuana legalization in general, like to me that just sort of flags like reefer mania. It just flags people that like they aren't really considering the issue. You know, personally, I think that, and this is why I also have to check myself when I was sort of like, well, the liquor stores, they plaster it all over, you know, like, but maybe we want our weed shops to be more conservative. But it's like, no, like I think marijuana is equivalent to alcohol in terms of how our society should see it. Is
We should have a
every single
doctor on. I don't know. I mean, it certainly works on your brain differently, your brain chemistry
right?
differently.
That's what I was gonna say. Like
So maybe
there
a
are
doctor would
some
be better suited to
differences.
say
Yeah,
that.
I
But
mean, there's certainly
it's an
some
easy
difference,
equivalent, right? Like you
right?
can kind of get the gist. I mean, I know some police officers that were very much against legalizing. And they see marijuana differently than alcohol. They see it as a gateway drug.
I
And
think a lot
so
of
I
that
don't
has,
I don't know
yeah,
why that is, but to me it does. That gave me pause too, right? Because okay, these are officers that deal with people
right.
that have serious drug issues and are distributing and these sorts of things. And so when an officer tells me it's a gateway drug, that makes me go, well, we should be cautious. We should be
Right.
cautious, more cautious than alcohol. I mean, alcohol is not good either, right?
Like, well, I
But
think the differences between alcohol is that we have good cultural norms around alcohol,
yes,
right?
that's
It's
right.
like mom or dad has a glass of wine or a beer with dinner, and it's literally just always been that way. When your kid says, "Oh, like, can I have something?" Like, "Oh no, that's mommy's drink. That's a daddy drink." Right? And that's what it, when they as
Mommy's
they're growing
juice.
up, yeah, mommy's
Mommy's juice.
juice. You might let them
My
have a
kid used to
little,
say, "Here, are you going to have some of your juice?" And
yeah.
my daughter brought me a Miller Lite. I'm kidding. And I was like, "Oh man, okay, I got to face some facts here."
But,
Here's like
you let them
5
take a
years
little
old.
sip here and there as they get older. We have a we and again, alcoholism is a huge issue, right? There's
Mhm.
millions of people that are afflicted by alcoholism, including children, or younger people. Um, so let's not pretend like there's no issues with alcohol. It's super
Right.
accepted. When you go out to an event, it's like, oh, let's have a drink. We can, add a little lubrication. But it's not like it doesn't cause major issues either. So again, I think we have to keep that in mind with the marijuana stuff as well. Is like, okay, yeah, like sure, maybe it is going to impact some people very negatively, but again, so does alcohol. And it's about how do we get our culture to the place where we can sort of have that same relationship with alcohol. And there's plenty of families that don't drink alcohol. They're just like, no,
Right.
we don't do that here or whatever it
My husband
is.
doesn't drink
Yeah.
hardly at all.
There you
I
go.
mean, every
And
once in a while I'll have a beer or something, but like it's just not for him.
right. Or some people who have a parent who has an alcohol problem. And so like in their household, we don't drink here, and we've gotten
Mhm.
comfortable with like that. And we support the people who don't do that. And we try not to throw it in their face. But let's get back to the article here. We kind of got caught up after this first line here. So last month, the city's planning board narrowly voted to allow hybrid medical recreational marijuana dispensary Sweet Spot to operate at 111 High Ridge Road, a shopping center which houses liquor stores, hair salons, weight loss center, in addition to a tutoring center, a video game coding center, and
Oh,
children pediatrics center.
I see.
So it is a pretty mixed use space. Again, they have the
Well,
liquor store there.
that's like polar opposites, right? So that's
Right.
probably the tension there, right? Because like you
Exactly.
have a pediatric at school and tutoring, so children will be present.
Right.
So
I mean, the whole place is super mixed. Again, there's a liquor store that's right there, though. Like, we're
right.
cool with like dropping Johnny off and like going to grab the beers for dinner.
Mhm.
So, maybe the traffic issue might be it's a pretty small shopping center. The parking lot is not big. It is on an incredibly busy area of town. So, I think that that's the better argument to make.
Mhm.
Like, I want to make principled arguments. I don't want to just say, well, we don't like weed and we can't have it around kids. Well, what about alcohol? Like, can you have alcohol around kids?
Well, just to play devil's, I have two things to say. One is a maybe a favorable thing for the legalization of marijuana, and that is that now there's so much lacing of marijuana with fentanyl that it's horrifying
Wait,
to
how does that
think.
happen?
I
You
have no
can
idea.
lace marijuana with fentanyl? I have to question that.
Well, I mean, you could lace it with anything. I mean, like you can soak it in Coke. You can. I mean, I don't want to give you
Okay.
ideas or anybody listening, but I mean,
I was gonna
these
say
things
that,
have been
okay.
done.
Yeah, I just don't understand what the interest is in doing that with the
Well, it's a different kind of high, I
yeah,
guess, and it's
yeah.
just a different way to ingest it. I don't know. Maybe who knows? I mean, maybe more control over what, like instead of taking a pill, because then it's just
Maybe.
like that's it.
I don't know.
You
I'd
could.
like to see an actual report of, like, how the marijuana and the fentanyl stuff, because like, I understand if you're doing it through, like, drugs that can be made into a powder or, like, a pill, right?
Mm,
Like, like Coke or, I don't know, there's all sorts of prescription pills and or opioids, right? Maybe they're not
mhm,
prescription, and, like,
sure.
that's what I hear it very commonly, like, the fentanyl getting mixed into because they can use just a little bit, add a super potent, like, punch to the whatever, the drug, and so I can understand that. I just don't understand how they do it with the weed, but we'll have to look more
I have
into
no
that.
idea. All
Yeah.
I know is that I've heard people
I
say
know, but
this
I
is.
feel like some of that is, like, reefer madness, like, I'm like,
It might be. I mean, but actually, that's a good argument to legalize it. Is what I was trying to say.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
No, I agree.
right? Because then it's safer, and I do think that, certainly, like when I was younger, in that my partying phase, I remember hearing these stories of like, oh my God, they got something laced with blah blah blah, fill in the blank, right? And that was definitely a deterrent. So there's that. But on the other hand, like if kids are dying over smoking
Right.
pot,
I
well,
wonder if
that's
it makes
another
it
kind of
easier or
safety issue.
harder to get, Like, does it make it because now if,
Supply and demand.
right, yeah, I'm just wondering, like, okay, I guess there's probably always somebody that's gonna be, like, selling pot to kids, right? Or it's probably gonna be, like, a kid who, like, goes and buys it and then sells it to their friends or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
But it's like, I just wonder, like, does the legalization because 'cause we're saying, "Oh, it makes into a space where only adults can get it." I don't know. I do know that the statistics of under 18 use has gone up as legalization has increased. But I
Sure.
wonder if there's other factors that have to do with that as well. Um, I mean, certainly when domestic producers are making it, there's definitely some that's going out the back door, right? And so then that's probably whatever the street supply is.
Well, or you have like a 19-year-old go in there, buy a bunch and resell it
Right. I don't
to
know, like,
younger
who's
kids,
it just I don't think that you would be buying from the dispensary to then resell. That seems a little expensive. Like,
Well,
it would be really expensive.
I mean, look, if you have no other option
I
and this is
suppose.
what you can access, then that's what you access. I mean, I think that seems like probably legit. It's probably a small percentage.
I
I
think
don't
I
know.
actually did do that when I was in, like, California, when I was, like,
Yeah, yeah.
18 years old or whatever. I was in, like, Santa Barbara and, like, went down to the beach and, like, gave 20 bucks for some guy to go to the dispensary because you did have to have a card,
Mhm.
um, there. So, yeah, no, I can see it, I can see it.
Well, I mean,
Alright.
the main thing is just the normalization. I mean, some
Right.
kids, are very rule oriented, even though they want to experiment. It's less of a risk if something is legal. They can make
That's
an
true.
argument in their head, like,
Right.
well, I mean, alcohol is legal. If I can go to war at 18, why shouldn't I be able to have a beer? Which I actually agree with that sentiment. So likewise, you could make the same argument with pot. So I think it just makes sense. Like there's going to
Right.
be kids that, that are willing to experiment more, with less stress over it, because what are they going to be thrown in jail because they did that? No, like that's not
Right.
that
Yeah, I mean, that was
risk.
never really the case, but no, yeah, I definitely think so, and I don't know how much the potency has gone up in the last, like, decade or decade and a half since I've been in high school. I think I think it's been pretty high for a while, but I think that there's also, like, the pens and things that allow kids to be able to do it more discreetly that is certainly something we should be concerned about, and
I
I
just
think
saw a post
sharing
with
it.
I just saw a post with a highlighter. This woman found a highlighter, but it was like, whatever you call those things.
Yeah,
It looked just
yeah.
like a highlighter, and she was like, "Parents, check your kids' highlighters now." I was like,
Dang, I
"Wow."
do not envy parents. I still have some time to get there with my son. But here, let's finish up this article and just see like what some people
Okay.
had to say. So one person was saying marijuana is still federally illegal and we don't want our children around it. Um, and Paul is actually like a really good advocate for the school. So I respect him. I respect his opinion, but I respectfully disagree with this one. Well, I don't respectfully disagree with this. This is a true statement. I don't want it around children, but like just the overall sentiment that like marijuana should be illegal, I disagree with him about that. So some use their allotted 3 minutes to share personal stories about family members who slipped into opioid addictions and then after trying marijuana, right? So that's the gateway drug argument. But Sweet Spot founders and staff reminded attendees that the point of the hearing was not to debate adult marijuana use, but to consider whether the dispensary meets zoning standards. Cannabis is here. It's legal, said Lisa Feinberg, Sweet Spot attorney in Carmody, blah, 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 whatever. This is a commercial use proposed on commercial property in a commercial zone, right? And again, that's a good point, right? Let's stay on topic. Let's keep our arguments principled. Under Stanford zoning regulations, recreational marijuana dispensaries are permitted in the commercial retail neighborhood. It's tell me it was a residential neighborhood, and I was like, "There's no way that spot is residential. It's zoned mixed use." And it's
Well, mixed use implies that there are residents there, so that's what they're saying.
right. Yeah, I mean, so it's basically it's a shopping center. It's like a
Mhm,
long it's like kind of like a long thin shopping center. And then there's like a road, like the major road, High Ridge is on this side, and then in like the streets behind it is like residential family. Some of it is single family, some of it is multifamily. So it's like on a super major busy road. Like that's like right before the Merit. Not right
mhm.
before the Merit, it's still a few miles. Um, let's see, the owner of Tutor Me says that there's students of all ages and she is not against marijuana use but doesn't like the proposed location. She says, I'm a cancer survivor. My son had multiple surgeries, so I have incredible passion for people who might need it, and I'm very understanding, but this is not the right location. And I think this is the argument that should be being made. Mitri said the tutoring center is less than 20 feet away from the proposed location, and they would have trouble with the increased traffic. And that's again true. Like these places do cause a lot of traffic. She said my car had been hit by a 16-year-old. I guess like we have accidents all the time because it's a small parking lot. It's also like a weird like shape.
Mm.
um yeah, just more people being like, whatever.
Well,
Let's
here's
see.
the
This
main
person said,
difference.
oh, let me just read this one. A child, regardless of their age, can access cannabis through the black market. When you put highly regulated cannabis facility in the area, you take away from the black market.
Is that for or against? I'm confused.
They're for it. They're saying like you can't sit here and say that like this is gonna threaten children because this is actually taking away from the black market, which is where children would be buying.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is I think the main difference is You and I like to talk about individual rights. So if somebody goes in and buys beer, booze, whatever it is, that doesn't affect me, right?
Right.
Unless they're drunk and they're, being obnoxious or something, but that's a different thing. But if somebody's buying pot, and I've seen this, and they just start smoking it, it's in the air. It's in the air. So then this is an argument that they could use, is that, do we really want to have a cloud around the tutoring center?
Well, you're not, hold on, but smoking in front of an establishment like that is illegal, right? So that should be enforced. I believe that smoking on the sidewalk, like even a cigarette, right? Like a certain distance
I don't
from
know what the
a
rules are. I
business.
just
I
know
don't
what
know
I've
what the rule
seen.
is. Yeah. So like, I would say that it should be the same as cigarettes. Like if you can't smoke a cigarette there, then you shouldn't be able to smoke pot there. Like I don't think
I
that
think you
people
can smoke cigarette. I mean, I see people
can
smoking
you
cigarettes.
smoking outside. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, maybe it might be different in Stanford. I mean,
we would
they're
have to
different
look up
rules.
the laws. Yeah, we would have to look up the rules and the laws and the regulations. Like,
I'm just
um,
giving another argument that they
yeah, but
could.
also like, I mean, people's if a person could stand there and smoke a cigarette and like you're not mad about inhaling cigarette smoke, or maybe you are. I don't know. I
No, I
still
don't
feel
like
like
that
it's the
either.
same. It's like the same. Like,
Depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm like, "Oh, that kinda smells good." But most of the time I'm like, "Yeah,
right.
uh,
I mean, like, I just think it's like you're not gonna get high from like passing by somebody's like puff of smoke. And again,
no,"
like
but it
it should be
does have
treated
like
like a
a
cigarette in terms of like where you can smoke it. I guess you can't smoke in the car though. You can smoke a cigarette when you're in your car, and you can't because like smoking and
smoke and drive
right,
pot, right, because it impairs you, so, and
right.
then they're getting in their car, but I mean, let me say this, I've seen people smoking what is clearly pot, get in their car and drive. I don't ever see somebody cracking open a beer, drinking it, and getting right in front of me and getting in their car, but I do with pot.
I mean, I've definitely seen that outside the liquor store, like where you're in there and like the
Really?
dude,
They
yeah,
just, like, open it?
like they come out with like either like the little ones,
Or
right?
the
Like
nips?
the little nips, or
Well,
like
I'm not saying they
they
don't
crack
listen,
open the tall boy,
I'm
you
not
know,
saying they
because
don't get in
Connecticut's
their
open
car and
container.
I don't I think what happens, at least around here and just in general, they get in their car. I've seen people get in their car and then, right? But, like, cracking it open on the sidewalk, drinking it as they're fumbling with their keys and get in, like, "Oh, let me put this," I just don't see that because if a cop sees that, right? Like, everybody's very fearful of a DUI. So, but because it's less invasive in a way, if you have a jewel with it, or if you or whatever, especially if you have a device that's not going to put a lot of smoke in the air, definitely people are smoking and getting in their car more often because
Yeah. I do
it's just
think
a
that there
different.
was data that came out of Colorado, like, after they had their pot legalization that showed that there was, like, an increase in fender benders and stuff, so
Right.
I certainly think that's an issue. I think it's a huge variability from person to person. I
Mhm.
don't think that it's not the same as alcohol where you can kind of, like, measure somebody's blood alcohol and be like, "Okay, like, this person's a belligerent," right? Versus, like, one person can take a few hits, I think, and be perfectly fine. Like there's people who can do that throughout their day and live completely normal lives. And then there's people who like I have a friend who like takes a sip of coffee and has like a panic attack, right?
Oh, wow.
Because like
That's
coffee
it.
just like really impacts her, like, gets the shakes and stuff. So I think that there needs to be some personal responsibility that obviously comes along with it. And that's gonna take time as the culture, evolves, I think, hopefully, to understanding, because there's been so much propaganda for so long, and then there's all sorts of weird things that happen when things are put into a black market. So I think that we have the propaganda that was just generally to overcome, and then there's the whole black market aspect of it, and then of course there's the war on drugs aspect of it in certain communities that were targeted. So we have a lot of things to work out as we go into this new phase with our relationship with marijuana. But I also think that's what's so genius about the way that federalism is set up, right? So you have your in your government, you have your 3 different branches, but you also have your different levels of government. And so we can try something here on a smaller scale, right? Technically, it's illegal by the federal government, but that's how it's spread to more and more places is they'll be like, we think that the federal government's wrong about this. And they start doing things, trying it out, and it spreads and it spreads. And then the federal government's sort of like, well, it's working fine in these places. So, we're not going to enforce our laws. And then eventually it becomes federal law.
Mhm.
So,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that gives choice, and I think that can be a really good thing, and people can live their lives the way that they want.
right.
When they have more choices, they can move to a state that's for it or move to a state that's against it. But it is tough, I think. I mean, I'm not surprised that there's pushback, and
Oh,
I would be surprised if there wasn't pushback, right? Because people aren't used to that, and they've chosen to live in Connecticut where it was illegal. They didn't move to California. They didn't move to Colorado.
right.
They moved here. So, when you change the rules in the middle of the game or in the middle of your raising your kids or whatever you want to, your life,
Yeah,
that's difficult for everybody.
I
So
agree.
I
And
being
I think
sensitive
though as
is
parents, like, we need
important.
to get better at having these difficult conversations. I think that a lot of where we are is because parents have abdicated their role. Parents have abdicated their role of being the adult that t tells their kids about these really difficult subjects, and the school takes over it, or we just want things to stay illegal and the government to play that role. But if we really t t we need to start taking that responsibility. We need to start having these hard conversations and figuring out the right ways. Or, sometimes it doesn't feel right. Sometimes it feels weird, right? My son is like, he's 7 and, he's a boy and I'm a girl and we live in a very close space and we have one bathroom. And so, well, we talk a lot about the difference between boys and girls and why he can do certain things and I can't do certain things and why I do certain things and he can't do certain things. And we keep the conversations very simple, very matter of fact, and then we move on, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that that's the way that we have to start doing it with kids. It's just simple matter of fact, this is the way it is. And then as they get older, you can ratchet up those conversations and the complexity and start bringing in some of their own individual experiences.
Well, I think that's the part of the problem, right? Like those conversations are being introduced without parental consent at various different ages. And every kid really is different. I mean, my three kids behave very differently. They have different levels of everything. I mean, because we're all individuals. And so I mean, it's hard, I think, for a teacher to even know, or even a school board to know, well, what is the when is this the right time? And that's why, I mean, generally when it comes to the all of the sex ed stuff, I'm like, just leave it to the
Right.
parent.
Yeah, it's like,
Because
focus on what you're reading, writing, arithmetic. Focus on that.
yeah, I mean, if the
And
kids were really succeeding and we had outstanding numbers and everybody was proficient, I would
right,
maybe have a different
right.
attitude. But right now, I'm like, can we just table that and get these kids, like, let's teach some phonics so they
I
can
know.
decode
Like,
and
all
read?
the things. I was in the school board meeting, and we have the update from this community partner and what we're doing with this program, and, "Oh, we need to approve more funding so the kids can get, their teeth checked and sealants in school," and it's just like,
They just need
"What
to
are we
learn to
doing?" Yeah, like, I want
read.
kids to have access to services. I understand there's probably some kids and their parents are in poverty and, by having the dentist in the school, they get more of the kids to see the dentist than otherwise would. But the problem is that because they're spending the time doing that and not teaching him to
Right.
read, then they
Yeah.
need to stay on state provided healthcare their whole life because, so it's like teach them to read, and then hopefully they'll be able to get their life together where, they can get some dental work, pay for their own dental work. I don't know. It's like, is that messed up? I'm probably like, no, because anytime we take government services away, we unleash the amazing ingenuity of the human mind. And that's what we always have to stress. It's not that we're taking things away from people, we are freeing people.
That's right. That's it.
Uh,
Absolutely right.
I think that's a great place to end for
Yep.
today. Make
It's
sure
very good.
that you're following me over on my various different social media platforms. Danelle, you want to give a plug for where people can find you?
Sure. I'm Connecticut Fair on Twitter. You can follow me there.
All right. So that's CTFAIR.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. So check us out. We're planning to make this kind of like a weekly thing. We're going to try out this time. We might try out some other times to see what works, better for our schedule, better for other people's schedules. But you're going to find us here Wednesday talking about news in Connecticut, the trending headlines, and trying to bring you a different perspective on them. So thank you everybody for checking in. Anybody who's checking out this stream later, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace.
Nice.